Okay, so the topic we've got is leadership through change. John and Angus are our guest speakers. My name is Mark Hammond. Run a small company called Connectivity Consulting. We focus on behavior transformations of teams to fundamentally shift innovation, engagement, diversity, inclusion, a whole range of pieces. So it's a very inclusive, systemic approach. Enough about me though, because this is all about the questions of John and Angus. So I'm going to hand over to John. John, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself briefly, and then I'll go to Angus.
Yeah, hi everybody. John Davis, as you can see in the background there, really focused on delivering management leadership courses, engaging culture, building people up to be the best version of themselves in the workplace. Morning, Tim. Nice to see you.
Morning, John. Hi, Lisa.
My sense is a few of you know each other, which is marvelous. So I'm going to hand over to Angus. Angus, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mark. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, my name is Angus Moyer. I'm the owner of GrowBiz Pro, a strategic consultancy based in Bassingham. Really, my business helps companies align their strategies, clearly the resources behind them to achieve their goals for the future. So I'm really pleased to be on the call today, and looking forward to a good session with John and Mark and all the participants.
Wonderful. Thanks to both of you. So I'm just looking at the time that we have. I'm going to probably push us out about another 5-10 minutes because we're starting at around 9:50. So we'll probably run until about 20 past, 25 past. Let's see how we go. The topic is leadership through change. We've got John and Angus, and I'm noticing a number of people are joining. I can't introduce you all, but I'm just going to say welcome to you as you come in. The topic is leadership through change. And the first question we're going to go to is the top of the list. And I'm going to open this up to John and Angus, and I'll jump in from time to time. And the reason I've just got my script over here, so excuse me if I'm looking off screen, is how do we encourage more of our leaders to lead and bring out the leaders in those that aren't necessarily leaders? John, if you wouldn't mind taking that first, and then I'll come to Angus for your perspective.
Yeah, I think you've got to start to be an exceptional leader yourself. Give them something to model. Kind, charismatic, considerate, compassionate, passionate, innovative, visionary, energetic. You've got to be that role model, I think. And then that will allow other people to be more confident. I think as a leader, you've got to help develop their skills and the competencies they need to lead. That's an important thing. Many people get promoted, but sometimes they're not match fit, if you like, for the position. So in order to bring that leadership out of an individual, we've really got to help them through this today. So think ahead, build that pipeline of talent, share an absolute clarity of vision, and then get out of their way, I think, and allow them to make those mistakes. The inevitable part of leadership growth, as we know. And make it a safe place when they do make that mistake. It's inevitable. We've all made them as leaders. You know, I think that's it really.
Fantastic. Thanks, John. Angus, do you want to add to that? The question, the topic being leadership through change for those who are joining, and the question we focus on at the moment is the first question is, how do we encourage more of our leaders to lead and bring out the leaders and those that aren't necessarily leaders? So Angus, what's your
John raised some good points there, and I think the one thing, I think we'll talk about this quite a bit in this 30 minutes, to me, is about culture. You've got to have the right culture in an organization with really focusing on things like openness, trust across the organization, that really then encourages and allows people to, as John said, to take risks and go out there. And it's okay to make mistakes. You only learn by making mistakes, but you've got to have that culture of openness and trust where people don't feel, well, I don't want to take something on because if I do it wrong, I'm going to get into trouble. That's not a positive culture to encourage our future leaders. So I think we'll talk more about culture, I think, in the next few minutes. But having the right culture is very, very important. And I think also, I'm a great believer in it's a kind of well-worn phrase, in human potential. And in my 30 years of working in leadership positions, I've been lucky to do that. I've seen a lot of people who you may not think they're the kind of outspoken, the loud person in the room, but you give them the chance to take on a project, to lead something, they can really shine, and they flourish and develop, and the organization achieves its goals and is better as a result. So big believer in human potential and giving people that chance to shine.
Yeah, I'm going to take those points that you've all raised, and just for the audience that we have is, how do we encourage more of our leaders to lead? How do we bring out the lead in those that aren't necessarily leaders? And there's some great points that were raised. One of the key pieces I'm going to summarize is lead by example. And that really draws on some of the key pieces that have been raised by both John and Angus around trust and creating a safe place. If you want people to contribute to your business and contribute to the context of your business, creating a safe place through psychological safety and building trust is really critical. What that means, though, is that individual leaders have to figure out what trust is for them and do some work on some of those pieces for themselves to create that. Likewise, for individuals who aren't necessarily in a leadership position, what it means to be a leader, even if you don't have a title, is to figure out how you show up in a space which is trusting and reduce politics, so that what comes out of that is a deep sense of creativity, because that's what's going to take businesses forward. And there's a clear link there between trust and psychological safety, openness, and the pieces that have been raised to date, where everyone can lead by example. So, for example, you can have far more challenging conversations around the right things, but because you've got trust, you can maintain the relationship rather than breaking. So that's a beautiful segue there, Angus and John, into the second question, which was, and we are going to talk a little bit more about it, which was what place does culture play in leadership? So we spoke a little bit about trust, leadership by example, the modeling, the skills, the competencies, trust and openness. What place does culture play in leadership? And John, I'll come back to you.
I think the two are welded together. I think whilst we understand that people and the staff and the employees and everybody contributes towards the culture, I think the leader is the one that has to defend it. So for me, the leader is what I'd call the guardian of the culture. It almost sounds like a superhero, doesn't it? Guardian of the culture. But that's what it is. The leader introduces values, norms and standards, and they must be defended at all costs. A good example of this one is, if you think about it, culture can get eroded, can't it, by allowing mediocre, average and negativity to sneak in the business, in my point. And I think Alex Ferguson is a good example of defending the culture. If a player became bigger than the team, or wouldn't follow the value system, or wouldn't play as instructed, you know what happened. He sold them, he moved them on. He wouldn't allow that negativity to sneak into the business. So how do you build that culture through leadership? It's about expressing interest in an employee's dreams, their aspirations, what they and who they want to become under your watch. And then when people become aligned to the business, you get higher levels of employee engagement. And when you get higher levels of employee engagement, you get greater traction, you get a more positive culture, and you get pace towards the vision. If you spin that on the head, if a leader shows no interest in the people at all, doesn't want to develop them, doesn't really care about them, then you get misalignment in the business. You get lower levels of employee engagement, you get lesser performance, and you get a toxic culture. So for me, the two go hand in hand. It all starts with the leader. The leader has to defend the culture at all costs.
Great perspectives and thoughts there. I'm just noticing we've got a few people dropping, which is lovely to see. A reminder, we will be taking questions at the end. So we've got a Zoom group chat. If you've got questions, please throw them in there. I'll do my best to come to them and build them in. You may find as we go through some of those questions and answers, but do drop them in if you have. And for those who've joined us, this is Leadership Through Change. John has just got us off on the question of, has just spoken to what place does culture play in leadership, and talking about the benefits of a positive, healthy culture and the leader being the guardian of that culture and the standards that come with that. Angus, what's your perspective on that question?
Well, again, a lot of good points raised by John there. I mean, to me, and culture is not an easy topic to define. It's a very broad church, that. But I think what I would say is that in any business, big or small, culture is not an agenda item. It is the agenda. You have to get the right culture in an organization if you're going to achieve your strategic goals, your commercial, all the different departmental goals that you want to have. So I don't think enough businesses spend enough time, and I've worked for a couple large businesses who I don't think spend enough time on culture, but it's very important to get it right. And as John talked about, if you align this to what it means for leadership, if you've got the teams out there not really seeing the leaders buying into whatever the culture is. So there may be a culture down in a document somewhere that everybody's got stuck on their desk. But if people don't truly believe it and live by it, particularly the leaders, then obviously the culture is not worth the paper it's written on. You've got to have a culture that permeates from the top of the organization, the leaders lead from the front. And if you get it right, it's a very, very empowering thing for an organization to achieve your goals. So it takes a lot of time to get it right. It's a constantly moving thing as well. It's not something you just create and just put it in a, in the filing rack and leave it. It constantly moves, and that's a good thing. But it's very important for leaders and their teams to work in getting the right culture in an organization for that organization to achieve its goals going forward. Critical, absolutely critical.
Some great points there, and some interesting concepts emerging. And before we move on to the next question, again, any questions, just throw them in, because this is proving to be a particularly rich conversation between the two of you. The one thing that's emerging for me is yes, the leader is the defender of the culture, but is there a perspective when the team needs to take responsibility for that as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's not, it can't just be the CEO or the sales, whoever it is, saying this is the way it's going to. If you don't get if people don't buy into the the culture and themselves, and that doesn't just mean nodding their heads. They've got to truly believe it and see that the leaders are operating that way as well. So you've got it certainly cannot just be it's the whole organization has to. Because everybody's got a very important role to play in the team. So everybody's got to buy into whatever the culture is in that organization. And I think to do that, you have to have within the culture that openness, trust, transparency, so that people do feel their voice can be heard without any penalties or things like that.
Absolutely. And so there, for those of you who are listening in, there's a great journey there that we've just touched on. There's a beautiful framework there in terms of, if you're a leader or if you're in a supporting function like HR and you want to get your organization to this piece of a culture which is really flourishing and with high levels of engagement, engage your leader first off. If you're the leader, show up in a different way. And there's a pathway there that we've just described in terms of how you can engage the leader, how you can, if you are the leader, how you can show up in a different way, lead by example, create a safe place which is based on trust, and then build your team so that they can challenge you in a healthy space as well. Some people feel that that's nigh on impossible, but I think what you're hearing from John, myself, and Angus is that is eminently you can absolutely create that, but it's based on some vulnerability for everybody involved. And once you share that, you can move and shift very quickly. So, some great thoughts there, John. Anything else you'd like to add to that? Building on this, what place does culture play in leadership? Any final pieces you want to add before we move on to the next question?
Well, I think hopefully Angus would agree. There's so many components to culture, isn't there? It's the value system. You're talking about people not living and breathing the culture at a higher level. But 9 times out of 10, that's not shared across platform with a value system that's robust enough. I often find that you'd have a framework to deliver culture through a value system, but most of the people that I talk to in the senior roles couldn't tell me what the values are in the business. And if the senior leaders aren't sharing values, then the people aren't likely to breathe life into themselves. It's up on the wall, but it's not in the hall. So therefore, it doesn't shape the culture, does it? It sort of, it's just, it's just this flavor of the week. And then, as Angus pointed out, then your culture goes up and down all the time, which is it's not right. No.
Absolutely. So for those listening, again, there's the lovely framework there in terms of, a really robust framework then where you can start, or where you can jump in and start to bring some of these aspects in, particular on this the role that leadership plays. Some of the key points are individuals can show up as leaders by the way they behave. The leaders are going to need to drive this. Because that's the values and the experiences that are in that situation are behaviors which then drive culture. So you've got a nice rich experience in that that you can absolutely play with regardless of where you are. Also remember the change curve that comes with that is as you start to shift and do things differently, people may show up on that change curve in different ways. And given that that segue, then the next question was, in the context of this culture and leadership, how can leaders create a new and better normal? There's a few things in there which are shifting and changing very quickly. I'm just going to open that back up to John and Angus. So John, would you like to take that? How can leaders create a new and better normal given everything we've spoken about and this importance of the points that we've been touching on?
Well, I think a lot of what we've been talking about is going to shape this new and better normal. But for me, it would be to go back and revisit what the values are today in the business. look at the culture as we've already discussed. I think I would be taking a look at the way that we develop our people as well in this example to help shape a new, better normal. I think if we're going to understand what the new normal looks like, I think we've got to talk to our customers a lot closer to understand what their problems are, because I wouldn't be surprised if some of their challenges have changed as well. And if their challenges have changed, then we need to alter our services, don't we, to embrace their new problems, if you like, to be able to support them at a higher level. I think as a leader, we need to encourage that innovation and creativity within our people. And I think it's a good opportunity to drop inadequate, below par, profit leaking systems and processes that might be in the business that are past their sell-by date. So I would go back and be revisiting a whole host of things in my business. Interesting statistic for you today. I read today that something like 1 trillion litres of water are lost in the average household in the UK per day. That's phenomenal, isn't it? 1 trillion pieces of water. So where in the business are the leaks, the problems, the issues that we haven't fixed and cured and prevented? And I think that's how we go and create our new normal. We look at what we're doing.
Wonderful. I'm going to hand this swiftly over to Angus because the council's just turned up outside my open windows and they're mowing the grass. So, Angus, over to you.
Well, that does sound like a lot of water, John. I've got to say, first of all, I'll definitely need to watch when I'm boiling the kettle or whatever next time. So that's a lot of water. But I think for me, it's a really good question mark in terms of where the world is today. There's a lot of businesses. We had the announcement last night. A lot of businesses are going to be going back in. Maybe there are people in furlough. They're trying to get the engines going again. So I think it's really important for with leadership and leaders to make sure there's a very clear vision for going forward. Now that may well be similar to what it was before before the whole COVID thing arrived, but it may need to change or shift or move a little bit based on what's happened in the business over the last 3 or 4 months. So having a very clear vision, the mission, vision, positioning for our business, for our brand, I think is very important as we return to the new normal. And then communicate that vision so everybody's absolutely clear on it. Again, one of my learnings has definitely been I've worked with some great leaders and some poor leaders, but the good ones, they work absolutely relentless on getting the key message across to the team. There's only so many things a human mind can take in. So the clearer you are as to what a business is trying to do, what it stands for, what its goals are, then the better chances that people will buy into it, back to the culture again. So having a very clear vision, communicating that very, very clearly, I think is really important as a lot of businesses get back to this new normal as we head forward to hopefully better times ahead.
Wonderful, thank you. Hopefully it isn't too loud, but they've moved off. So just to bring those points together, there's a really important piece that's sort of emerging from here, which is context. We've all been through this together, which is so different from the last about 6 months ago, so context becomes key as we emerge into this new reality where some of the markets may not be there, some of our customers may not be there, and the markets have shifted and changed significantly. Bringing the context into our teams, and really, as both Angus and John have spoken to, is to put that context front and center, makes it real for people. Gives them a real say, and builds the trust, builds the engagement, because they're going to have the solutions. The other piece here is leaders may not necessarily have all the answers. Given the complexity and the pace of how things are going to move, they may need to figure out how to draw on their teams and make themselves vulnerable to engage those answers, or those ideas at the very least. They wouldn't even go anywhere near solutions, so just go with ideas to begin with. So there's something in this new and better normal, which is how do we engage people in a fundamentally different way with the rich context that is our business environment, and not necessarily keep that in the domain of leadership. Sharing this down through the organization and asking people to participate. I've seen that happen with a client where they're about to lose 80% of their revenue with one client. And when they asked a team of 150 people what their ideas were, they were able to address that and completely overcome their revenue challenges. So this piece is, and this is only one lens again, but there's a tremendous opportunity here for leaders to shift and change, and for individuals to shift and change the way they do. So the importance of leadership to show up in a different way becomes really critical. Okay, just again, a gentle reminder, if you've got questions, throw them in, we will come to them. And for those of you who've joined, we're cracking on with a wonderful conversation here. And I'm going to move us on to the next sort of layer of this leadership and change piece, which is, what do you think the continued pressures on leaders have been during the crisis? And how can we use these pressures for the positive? So that everyone's been through an experience. What are the positives we can take from this and apply to this new normal that we're talking to, given culture and ensuring leadership is embedded in this? So, John, would you like to take that one?
Yeah, well, so if we think about the pressures people have been under, I think we had a conversation a couple of weeks back about this, didn't we, Angus and Mark? I think it's from moving from certainty to uncertainty has been a pressure, hasn't it? We don't really know where we're going at this moment in time, some people. So we haven't had a crisis like this, so we've got no experience to draw from, which has been a challenge. So that's been a pressure for people. There's a heavy burden for accountability of those who lead. You know, with great leaders putting their people first, and those that I've spoken to are massively concerned about the well-being of their team and their people. So there is if you like, a caring issue in this as well, which is really something we've not experienced from some leaders before. I think there's a pressure about making the right decision. Some leaders have procrastinating over making decisions in case they make the wrong one, which is a great shame due to bad or incorrect information. So there's that delicate balance there about decision making. And again, I think, how can you use these pressures for the positive? Well, I think you can use the pressures to reinvestigate your business, create new, better strategies, look at how you can bring the team together, build a stronger, fitter team for the future. How we can, I'd be investigating every area of our business. It's a great opportunity really to have a complete sweep across our business to see what is and isn't working, and use those pressures as an opportunity to educate each other and galvanize the team, I think, and come back to what Angus said, which of course is, you know, help get everybody shaping the vision of what we can do. What do we, you know, that question of what do we want to be famous for as a team moving forward? So that's my thoughts on that one. Yeah.
And a marvelous segue over to Angus. Thanks, John. Some great points in there. Angus, would you like to build on that?
Yeah, I mean, let's be under no illusions. There's been a lot of businesses over the last, period have had some really tough challenges with, basic. I mean, we've all seen a lot of famous names are no longer going to be around. So there's been a lot of challenges on cash flow, managing people, all that. So I mean, really difficult times, and there's going to be some more difficult times to come for sure. But we're all better for learning, and that's not making light of some of the big challenges that these businesses have had to go through. So as John says, you have to look at the learnings you would take from this period and say, okay, because there are opportunities still out there. I'm not sure if anybody was on the Bank of England. It doesn't sound the most, I hope they don't take this the wrong way, the most dynamic thing to get an update from the Bank of England, but I sat on that thing a couple of weeks ago, and I was absolutely amazed that they were forecasting that the growth that we're going to see decline this year, they believe we will be back to pre-COVID levels by the start of 2022. So that to me, okay, there's a lot of pain still to go through, but whether you believe the Bank of England, and I shared that with quite a few people, and they said, you must be joking, that's never going to happen. Stuff. But I said to them, I said, you need to get your PR, because what I was taking from it, there's still opportunities out there. So we've got to use this period we've been through for learnings, reassess where we are. There may be some changes that have had to be made in the business, and then set ourselves up for future success based on those learnings. And obviously leaders have to involve the team, get people together, get the right culture, as I've talked about, to enable that, the ability to seize that opportunity, which I think is out there, but it's going to take a little bit of time to get to it.
I think just adding on Mark's point there, if I may, very, very quickly, one of the key things a leader has to be at this moment in time is one of the most positive person within the business, without a doubt. Absolutely have absolute faith that everything will be fine. So complete and utter positive, Mr. Positivity.
Yep.
I've got the council again, so I'm going to just introduce how can we overcome the resistance to change, and leave that with Sean.
Sorry, Mark, I missed that. Say again, Mark. Sorry.
Sorry, the lawnmower's outside. Given everything we've spoken about, how can we
Yeah.
help leaders overcome the resistance to change?
How do you help leaders overcome resistance to change? Well, I think it's looking at their emotional response to change, their first emotional response. What is it inside of them that's holding them back and preventing them from wanting to change? Change, as we've mentioned before in the past, change has a significant emotional effect on people, and I think an emotionally intelligent leader will understand how they're feeling about change. But I think you've also got to look at what causes the resistance to change in most businesses. Misunderstanding about the need for change, fear of the unknown, lack of competence, connected to the old way too much, changes to routine, all these kind of things, low trust in the leader, it's a temporary fad, poor communication levels, lack of benefits and rewards. So I think you've got to go and have a look at the whole process of change, I think, as to why it doesn't necessarily work in businesses. So from a leadership point of view, I think you've got to develop your emotional intelligence and recognize why you're fearful perhaps of change.
Great points there, John, and I would echo those. Angus, I'm going to...
Yeah, I mean, I think culture plays a big part in this again. So sorry to keep harping on about culture. But if you've got the right culture, people should embrace change. I mean, I think most successful organizations have to evolve, and that requires some change. And clearly, some people don't like change; they're comfortable in the way it is. But can you imagine the conversation with Amazon? After he started selling books, and then somebody said, "Well, maybe we should start selling some other things," and people are going, "Oh no, let's stick to books." Well, we all know what happened there. So you've got to have the right culture to take people with you, and that sometimes means difficult conversations. There's a great company in the US, you may have heard. It's an online shoe retailer called Zappos. Started up by one guy, very, very successful company, and they're all often held up as a company that's got one of the best cultures in the organization. And they've actually gone through a process in their culture where they've said, look, to individual people, you're not the right, you're working in the wrong place. This just isn't the right organization for you. In some cases, they've actually paid them to leave. It was a perfectly, civil conversation with two people, but those people just weren't the right people to be in that organization. So sometimes you've got to make sure, have those difficult conversations to enable change to happen. But there's always going to be some resistance to it, but communicate, take people with you within the right culture, and change is absolutely critical to any successful organization, in my opinion.
Wonderful.
So Mark, there's a second part to this question, isn't there, about enabling well-being in the business as well? And I think if you're going to drive change there, I'm sure Angus hopefully will agree, I think it's time to redesign what the workplace looks like when you make these changes. Make it lighter, cleaner, less crowded environments. That's something we're going to have to work on. Support work from home as a leader. Implement wellbeing and wellness strategies somewhere across the business as well, and provide that resilience training. I think all that is going to enable change more comfortably for people.
Absolutely. So as a quick summary then, what can leaders do to help overcome the resistance to change? Culture is key, context is key, showing up using trust is key, communicating is absolutely critical, and maybe not surprising people with the change, maybe engaging them with it with a different lens is vital towards helping unlock the transition, because people's well-being sits within this. If they can have a voice, if they can be heard, not just on a one-off as a tick box exercise, but on a regular, frequent basis through their leaders, through their teams, the ownership and engagement is going to be significant. We've spoken a lot about communication through the session. So there was a final question on communication, but my sense is we've actually really touched on that quite powerfully. So if it's okay with everyone, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drop in some of the questions that are popping up. I'm going to pose them to both John and Angus, because we've had some good ones come through. Maybe not the ones about jogging bottoms, because those are wonderful, but I'm going to shift through quickly to what does it now make possible? It brings an opportunity for innovative and collaborative leaders. This is the new emerging reality. Yes, it's challenging, but it does not drive creativity, but it does drive creativity like never before for those who with a positive growth mindset. But where do leaders go for support? John?
Well, obviously there's Angus, myself, there's you. Absolutely. And we have, as a business, we have masterclasses, we have one-to-one coaching sessions, which I'm sure you all do. So yes, I'd reach out to your person of influence, that support mechanism, and try and relationship up. I've always worked on the principle of relationshiping up. So I try and find somebody who's already got the skill set that I admire, that I want to develop, and introduce myself, get to know them, and just, pick their brains and help them ask the question. You see, one of the most powerful tools we have as leaders are the quality of the questions we ask. And when you ask people for help who are already in the role, who already have that level of skill set that you're looking to develop, I think it's fairly easy if you just build that relationships. Yeah. But we're here to help as well, aren't we, guys?
Yeah. There's a wonderful the question is, what does this now make possible? And I think Angus is talking to, if you're willing to ask the questions, anything's possible. If you're willing to take the risks, make yourself vulnerable, create some safety, anything's possible. The level of creativity and innovation that can come from just that simple act, and it's only one, it's one of many, is it can transform organizations. But you've got to be brave, and you've got to show up in a different space. So what does it make possible? I think anything. Angus,
I think
where do leaders go for support?
Yeah, I think the question about support, I mean, I've been lucky, and I'm sure every, on the call here, having a mentor. I've had several mentors over the years who, are people who, not necessarily even business people sometimes, but people who you can go to, who can give you an independent, some feedback or some advice. Who, I think having a good mentoring person or persons to go to is always good. And I'll mention the C word again, culture. I mean, in a great culture in an organization, it's a very powerful thing for a leader to kind of bare their soul to some of the team a little bit and say, hey, I'm struggling with this. I'm not sure which way to go here. What do you guys think? And some people may think that's being weak, but I think that shows tremendous, a great culture, first of all, and a lot of courage from a leader to say, hey, I'm not quite sure. What do you think? There's a balance there. You don't want to be asking your team all the time for those kind of questions, but sometimes, I think that can work quite powerfully as well. So, and obviously, as John said, there's some great consultancies out there who can obviously deliver tremendous value to your business as well to help. So that's what, my feedback.
Wonderful, thank you. John, any final closing comments, and then I will move into the summary and a wrap up.
Anything I'd say, Mark, is no one's ever fully developed on leadership. It's a journey. Yeah, and if you've guys got an interest in leadership, start your journey. There's always something else to learn. I've been fascinated by leadership and led businesses all my life. I'm 42 years in business now, and you learn something all the time, and it's forever evolving. It's fluid. It moves. And great leaders move with the times as well, don't they? Yeah, I think they recognise that actually. When I look at my team, my team gift me with their wisdom every day. Yeah, so there's always something to learn as a leader.
Absolutely. Okay, I am conscious of time. Amy, thanks so much for the clarity on the question, which was around dressing smartly. I'm going to have to leave it there for the moment, but I'm sure we can come back to you post the event. I'm going to run through very quickly for 2-3 key points from both John and Angus to summarize the conversation, so that those of you who popped in and out can get a flavor for what the conversation's key points were. John, I'm going to start with you. If you could do a couple of minutes, and then Angus a couple of minutes, just on 2 or 3 key points, that'd be marvelous. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. I think the key points that come out of this for me is don't fear change. Change is inevitable. It's around us all the time. Get comfortable feeling uncomfortable. That's my advice on that one. I think in terms of create a safe environment for people to work in. People will inevitably make mistakes. It's part of learning. And when people do make those mistakes, step into that moment and turn it into a learning moment for that individual. In terms of change, wherever possible, involve absolutely everybody in the change process. Be totally transparent. The more you involve your team, the more ownership they bring to the change. And of course, in terms of the wellbeing and mindfulness, well, there's so many programs out there to support you, and it is an integral part of a strategy today, and it should be in your strategy. So they're my thoughts.
Marvelous, thank you, John. Great summary there. And Angus, over to you, sir. The floor is yours.
I think leadership through change. I'll go back to the C word again. Get the culture right first of all. That really encourages a real, atmosphere of leadership within an organization from the top to the bottom. So that's really important. Change, does give opportunity. So have a really clear vision as we emerge from this challenging time. Make sure your vision for your team is really, really clear, and communicate. Everybody should be able to, if they're asked by a friend at a cocktail party, who do you work for, what do you do? They should be able to rattle off, hopefully not too much business talk at cocktail parties, but this is what my business is about. So having that really clear vision is really important as we emerge through this, and there's lots of opportunities out there. And I think, John did mention some of them. I'm a Man United fan as well. Maybe you're not sure a Man United fan, John, but Alex Ferguson, obviously, there's lots of famous leaders we can mention who are high profile. But you look to the last 3 or 4 months, we've had some incredible leaders in our hospitals, in our health care homes, places like that. So it doesn't have to be famous Alex Ferguson. It happens every day out there in the world, obviously. So leaders are at all different in all different walks of life. So
wonderful. So quick thank you from me to both of you for your contributions and sharing your thoughts. For those of you who've joined us and participated and for those of you who dropped in and out, and for those who are going to come in and watch this session as part of the recording, there's a wonderful framework that's emerged in this conversation. If you go back and you listen to the nuggets, you will see that there's a pathway to follow. This is not necessarily a linear piece, it's a more systemic piece, and it talks to trust, engagement, psychological safety, culture, behavior, leading by example. So there's a beautiful pathway that's emerged in this conversation about what you can do to practice, either as a leader or as a team member, as well as an HR practitioner or any part of an organization, to help your organization shift and deal with the changes and the realities that are unfolding and emerging. So the last couple of points. So thank you for your engagement. Thanks, John and Angus. Really appreciate your time and for your opinions and your thoughts. Always a rich and varied conversation. So thank you. This webinar is a part of work that that is ongoing, focused on leadership and well-being. And if you want to find out any more information, please contact the team at events@lincolnshirechamber.co.uk. There's a lot more information there. All 6 webinars are being recorded, and they will be available at a later date, and links are going to be provided to you at the end of the show.